Do you know how a single strand of DNA can unravel decades-old mysteries? Have you ever wondered how advances in technology can bring hidden truths to light, exposing secrets buried for over 30 years? The story of William Talbot II is one such chilling example. A case where science and perseverance collided to solve a gruesome double murder that had haunted two families and baffled investigators for decades. But how could someone evade justice for over 3 decades? What role did cutting-edge DNA technology in genetic genealogy play in uncovering the truth? In today's video, we are going to explore the twists and turns of the William Talbot II case and uncover how justice finally prevailed. The case of William Talbot II centers on the brutal 1987 murders of Tanya van Cuylenborg, 18, and 𝐦𝐮𝐞, 20, a Canadian couple who vanished during a trip from British Columbia to Washington State. The couple intended to pick up a furnace part in Seattle but never returned home. Days later, Tanya's body was discovered in a ditch in 𝐬𝐮𝐫𝐞 County. She had been sexually assaulted and shot in the head. 𝐦's body was found 2 days later under a bridge in 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐫𝐞 County. He had been beaten and strangled with twine. Their van was later located in Bellingham, with evidence pointing to foul play. For over 3 decades, the case remained unsolved despite the collection of DNA evidence from the crime scenes. In 2018, a breakthrough occurred when investigators used genetic genealogy to identify William Talbot II as the suspect. This revolutionary technique, which traces DNA through public ancestry databases, linked Talbot to the murders. Talbot, a long-haul truck driver living in Washington, was arrested in May 2018 after his discarded DNA was matched to the crime scene evidence. At trial, prosecutors presented DNA as the key piece of evidence against him, along with circumstantial details about his movements. Talbot maintained his innocence, but in 2019, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. William Talbot II, born in December 1963, was an ordinary man leading an unremarkable life in Washington State. He lived quietly, blending into the backdrop of his suburban surroundings. For decades, Talbot remained unnoticed by the public, going about his routine without drawing attention. But in 2018, he would become a central figure in one of the most significant cold case resolutions in the United States. William Earl Talbot II was born in Monroe, Washington, a small town nestled in 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐞 County, known for its tight-knit community and serene landscapes. He was the only child of Patricia and William Talbot Sr., a modest family with a low public profile. The Talbots were well regarded in their community, yet little was remarkable about William's upbringing. Those who knew him during his early years described Talbot as a quiet and reserved child. He was not particularly outgoing and preferred to keep to himself. His demeanor often gave the impression of someone content with solitude, a characteristic that persisted into adulthood. Despite his introverted nature, Talbot did not seem unusual in any significant way. He was simply a product of his environment, growing up in a small town where people largely minded their own business. Monroe itself was the epitome of a sleepy town in the Pacific Northwest. Its rural charm and picturesque landscapes fostered a slower pace of life, where residents relied on each other in times of need but otherwise kept their distance. This environment seemed to suit Talbot, whose unassuming personality made it easy for him to blend into the background. He attended local schools, earning his diploma without any notable achievements or incidents that would set him apart from his peers. After graduating high school, Talbot chose a practical career as a truck driver. This profession would later become a critical detail in connecting him to a chilling crime, but at the time, it seemed like a natural fit for his solitary disposition. Long-haul trucking offered him the opportunity to work independently, traveling across the country with minimal social interaction. It was a job that allowed him to maintain his preference for a quiet, private life. As an adult, Talbot continued to live under the radar. His life followed a predictable routine, characterized by long hours on the road and quiet evenings at home. By the time he settled in SeaTac, Washington, a suburb south of Seattle, Talbot had mastered the art of keeping to himself. His neighbors described him as polite but distant, a man who didn't go out of his way to engage with others. Talbot's reserved nature extended to his workplace as well. Colleagues noted that he was a solitary figure, rarely forming close friendships or participating in workplace banter. While some might have interpreted his demeanor as aloof or standoffish, it was more likely a reflection of his deeply introverted personality. Unlike many of his peers, Talbot never married and had no children. This lack of close personal relationships further contributed to his enigmatic presence. Without a spouse or family to anchor him to the community, Talbot remained somewhat of a mystery, even to those who lived near him. He maintained a relatively clean record throughout his life, with only a few minor run-ins with the law for unrelated offenses. These incidents were inconsequential and did little to disrupt the perception of him as an ordinary man. To his neighbors, co-workers, and acquaintances, Talbot was just another face in the crowd, neither remarkable nor threatening. Yet behind this facade of normalcy lay a dark secret, one that would remain hidden for over 3 decades. Looking back, Talbot's choice of career and his solitary lifestyle take on a more ominous tone in light of what would later come to light. His job as a long-haul truck driver gave him unparalleled mobility, allowing him to travel extensively without raising suspicion. It also provided him with the anonymity that someone with something to hide might find invaluable. 𝐽𝐿 and Tanya van Cuylenborg, a young Canadian couple from Saanich, British Columbia, had been in a relationship for about 6 months when they set off on what was supposed to be a short overnight trip. The couple met in high school and quickly grew close, sharing common interests and dreams. On 18 November 1987, they embarked on a journey to Seattle in Cook's father's bronze 1977 Ford Club van to purchase furnace parts for Cook's father's business. What began as a routine errand would soon spiral into a tragic tale that would haunt their families and communities for decades. The couple's trip began with a ferry ride aboard the 𝐬𝐻𝐾𝐿 from Victoria, British Columbia, to Port Angeles, Washington. Once they arrived, they traveled southeast along Route 101, passing through the scenic stretches of the Olympic Peninsula. Their journey included a stop in Bremerton, where they boarded a second ferry destined for Seattle. A fuel receipt later found in the van confirmed they had refueled along the route between Port Angeles and Bremerton, a seemingly routine stop that became one of the last concrete pieces of evidence of their movements. The pair was last seen boarding the ferry in Bremerton. Witnesses noted nothing unusual about their demeanor. They appeared to be a happy couple on an ordinary trip. However, this sighting would be the final confirmed moment of their journey together. When Cooke and Van Cuylenborg failed to return home as planned on the 19th of November, their families grew increasingly worried. Both were responsible and reliable, and it was unlike them to lose contact. As hours turned into days, their absence became even more concerning. By the 20th of November, their families reported them missing to local authorities, initiating a search that would span 2 countries. The investigation began with urgency, as law enforcement and volunteers worked tirelessly to retrace the couple's steps. Their route was carefully examined, and authorities sought any clues that could indicate what had happened. The discovery of the fuel receipt in the van confirmed that they had made it partway through their planned trip. Still, beyond that point, their movements became a troubling mystery. Cooke and Van Cuylenborg were young, full of promise, and beloved by their families and friends. 𝐽𝐿, 20, was a kind and reliable individual who came from a supportive family. He was known for his mechanical skills and dedication to his father's business. Tanya van Cuylenborg, 18, was a bright and spirited young woman with a love for adventure. Together, they had an easygoing and affectionate relationship, making their sudden disappearance even more baffling. As days passed without any word from the couple, fear and speculation gripped their families. The small-town communities of Saanich and Victoria rallied around them, offering support and assistance in the search. Media coverage spread rapidly as the case of the missing couple gained national attention. Authorities coordinated with U.S. and Canadian law enforcement to expand the search area, focusing on the couple's planned route through Washington state. Tips and sightings were reported, but none yielded substantial leads. With little to go on, investigators grew increasingly concerned that something had gone terribly wrong. The disappearance of Cooke and Van Cuylenborg shattered the sense of safety in their close-knit community. Their families clung to hope but feared the worst as days turned into weeks. The search for answers would soon take a devastating turn, revealing a crime that shocked even seasoned investigators. On November 24, 1987, nearly a week after the couple was last seen, Tanya's half-naked body was found in a ditch along a rural road near Alger in Skagit County, Washington, a short distance south of Bellingham. A passerby spotted her remains in the isolated area, bringing the search for the missing couple to a devastating turning point. Tanya had been bound with plastic ties, raped, and shot in the head. The brutality of the crime shocked even seasoned investigators. Initially, law enforcement suspected 𝐬𝐝 might have been involved in Tanya's death, as there was no sign of him or their van at the time. However, both families vehemently rejected the idea, insisting that J would never harm Tanya. Their trust in J's character proved justified when subsequent discoveries confirmed he, too, had met a violent end. The following day, on the 25th of November, more evidence surfaced in Bellingham. Tanya's wallet and keys were found discarded near the Greyhound bus station, seemingly dumped to divert attention or erase traces of the perpetrator. Nearby, investigators located the bronze 1977 Ford Club van the couple had been traveling in, abandoned just a few blocks away. Inside the van, police uncovered several pieces of crucial evidence. Plastic ties, identical to the ones used to bind Tanya, were discovered, along with plastic gloves. Receipts found in the van, including one for the Bremerton-Seattle ferry, confirmed that the couple had indeed taken the second ferry on their trip. This discovery supported the belief that they had followed their intended route, at least until they reached Seattle. However, some items were notably missing, including Tanya's Minolta X 735mm camera, which she had brought along to document their trip. Despite extensive searches, the camera has never been recovered, and its whereabouts remain a mystery to this day. While investigators processed the evidence in Bellingham, another grim discovery was made on the 26th of November. 𝐬𝐝's body was found nearly 60 miles away from where Tanya's body had been located, under a bridge in Snohomish County, Washington. He had been brutally beaten with rocks and strangled, with the twine used in the crime left behind. The distance between the two crime scenes indicated that the killer had deliberately separated the couple before ending their lives. The methods used to kill Tanya and Jay further emphasized the calculated and personal nature of the crimes. Tanya's death involved sexual violence, and the plastic ties used to restrain her pointed to premeditation. Jay's murder, on the other hand, was more physically brutal, involving blunt force trauma and strangulation. The contrast suggested a cold, methodical approach by the perpetrator, who might have viewed Jay as a physical threat and Tanya as a victim to exploit. These discoveries left law enforcement scrambling to identify the killer. The evidence collected at the crime scenes, including DNA samples, pointed to a single unknown male. However, in 1987, DNA testing technology was still in its infancy, and investigators lacked the tools to match the samples to a suspect. The brutal murders of Tanya van Cuylenborg and 𝐬𝐝 shattered their families and the communities they came from. Both were young, vibrant, and deeply loved by those who knew them. Tanya's father described her as a spirited and curious young woman who loved photography, while Jay was remembered as a kind and reliable individual who was deeply committed to his family. In the immediate aftermath of the discoveries, the case became a priority for law enforcement in Washington state. The evidence collected, including the plastic, ties, gloves, receipts, and the DNA samples, would eventually play a pivotal role in solving the case. But in 1987, investigators could only wait for technological advancements to catch up with their findings. For decades, the murders of Tanya van Cuylenborg and 𝐬𝐝 remained unsolved, a haunting cold case that gripped the Pacific Northwest. Their families lived with the anguish of unanswered questions, hoping that one day justice would be served. That moment would come over 30 years later with the advent of genetic genealogy, a groundbreaking tool that would finally identify the killer and provide long-awaited closure for their loved ones. The murders of Tanya van Cuylenborg and 𝐬𝐝 presented a deeply unsettling mystery for investigators in 1987. As the investigation progressed, disturbing elements of the case emerged, hinting at the killer's calculated and arrogant nature. Among the most chilling was the discovery of plastic gloves left conspicuously in the couple's abandoned van, a detail that investigators believed was meant as a direct message to law enforcement. Detective Robert 𝐸𝐵𝐿 of the Seattle Police Department reflected on this sinister detail, stating, "He leaves those behind as a sign to the police that you needn't look for fingerprints because I wore these gloves, and he has confidence that there's nothing that's going to connect him with these crimes." This brazen act suggested a perpetrator who not only sought to evade capture, but also took satisfaction in mocking the authorities tasked with finding him. While the gloves yielded no usable fingerprints, police were able to extract DNA evidence from the van, a pivotal breakthrough in an era when forensic technology was still developing. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match any profiles in existing criminal databases, leaving investigators without a clear suspect. Despite this setback, the DNA sample was carefully preserved, ensuring it would remain a key piece of evidence as forensic science advanced. The meticulous and deliberate manner in which Tanya and Jay were killed further fueled speculation about the killer's background. Although specific details about the killings were withheld from the public, investigators believed the crimes exhibited behaviors and techniques that suggested familiarity with the prison system. This raised the possibility that the suspect had previously served time, but had not been entered into DNA databases due to the limitations of the era. In the late 1980s, collecting DNA samples from inmates was not a routine practice, meaning the killer might have evaded detection even if he had a criminal history. One theory posited by law enforcement was that the couple had encountered their killer on one of the two ferries they took during their trip, most likely the second ferry from Bremerton to Seattle. Investigators believed the perpetrator might have been a hitchhiker who struck up a conversation with the couple during the ride. Tanya and Jay, known for their kind and trusting natures, may have offered him a lift once they reached Seattle, unknowingly sealing their fates. This theory aligned with the timeline and evidence, suggesting the killer took advantage of their generosity to gain access to their vehicle and later carry out the horrific crimes. Adding to the anguish of the investigation were the cruel taunts directed at the victims' families. In the months following the murders, both families began receiving graphic and disturbing greeting cards describing the killings in grotesque detail. The cards, postmarked from major cities such as Seattle, Los Angeles, and New York, were written by the same individual and appeared to revel in the pain caused by the murders. The families were devastated by this cruel harassment, which compounded their grief. The police initially considered the possibility that the card writer might be the killer, given the graphic descriptions and timing. However, after years of investigation, a breakthrough came in 2010 when authorities identified the person responsible for the cards, a 78-year-old Canadian transient with a history of severe mental health issues. The man had no connection to the crimes and was determined to have written the cards as part of his delusions. His actions, though unrelated to the murders, caused significant emotional harm to the families and temporarily diverted investigative resources. The discovery that he was not the killer was a relief, but also a sobering reminder of the many complexities surrounding the case. Despite the taunts and the lack of immediate leads, investigators remained steadfast in their belief that the killer's DNA would eventually provide the key to solving the case. The meticulous preservation of evidence, including the DNA sample from the van, ensured that future advancements in forensic technology could be leveraged to identify the perpetrator. The case, however, went cold for decades, leaving the families of Tanya and Jay with unanswered questions and an enduring sense of loss. The killer's confidence in his ability to evade justice appeared well-founded for many years. His decision to leave the gloves as a taunt, his apparent understanding of how to avoid leaving incriminating evidence, and the haunting possibility that he had used his knowledge of the prison system to carry out the murders all painted a chilling portrait of a calculated and remorseless individual. For more than 30 years, the mystery of who had killed Tanya van Cuylenborg and J.𝐾𝐭 remained unsolved. It wasn't until the revolutionary advent of genetic genealogy in 2018 that investigators were finally able to connect the DNA evidence to a suspect, William Talbot II. His arrest and subsequent conviction brought a measure of closure to the families and underscored the importance of preserving evidence in cold cases. For over 30 years, the murders of Tanya van Cuylenborg and J.𝐾𝐭 remained a haunting cold case. Despite the evidence collected, including DNA from the crime scenes, investigators had been unable to identify the perpetrator. The case took a groundbreaking turn in 2018 when technological advancements in forensic science and genetic genealogy provided the breakthrough that ultimately led to justice. On April 11, 2018, a composite sketch of the suspect was released using a revolutionary method known as snapshot DNA phenotyping, developed by Parabon Nanolabs. This technique analyzed DNA evidence recovered from semen found on Tanya van Cuylenborg's trousers and used it to predict the physical appearance and ancestry of the suspect. The resulting sketch provided investigators with a crucial lead and gave the public a visual representation of the man responsible for the heinous crimes. Building on this new technology, investigators partnered with Parabon Nanolabs to utilize another cutting-edge tool, genetic genealogy. They uploaded the suspect's DNA profile to 𝐬𝐮𝐫𝐞, a public genealogy website that allows users to trace familial connections. This method had recently gained prominence after its successful use in identifying Joseph James DeAngelo, the notorious Golden State Killer. By tracing familial matches through 𝐬𝐮𝐫𝐞, investigators worked backward to construct a family tree that eventually led to a single individual, William Earl Talbot II. On May 18, 2018, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office announced that Talbot, a 55-year-old truck driver from SeaTac, Washington, had been arrested for the murder of Tanya van Cuylenborg. Talbot had no prior criminal record, which explained why his DNA had not been in any law enforcement databases. However, his DNA matched the evidence recovered from the crime scenes, placing him at the center of the investigation. The arrest shocked those who knew Talbot. Described by neighbors and acquaintances as quiet and unremarkable, he had lived a seemingly ordinary life for decades. However, the evidence against him was damning, and prosecutors charged him with 2 counts of aggravated first-degree murder in the deaths of Tanya van Cuylenborg and 𝐽𝐾. In June 2019, after a high-profile trial, Talbot was found guilty on both counts. Prosecutors presented the DNA evidence as the cornerstone of their case, arguing that it unequivocally linked Talbot to the crime scenes. The jury agreed, and Talbot was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of Tanya and Jay, the verdict marked a long-awaited moment of justice, bringing closure to a case that had haunted them for decades. However, the story did not end there. On December 7, 2021, an appellate court overturned Talbot's conviction, citing potential juror bias during the original trial. The issue stemmed from a juror who admitted to harboring preconceived notions about Talbot's guilt before deliberations. The defense argued that this bias violated Talbot's right to a fair trial, while the prosecution countered that the defense had the opportunity to remove the juror during jury selection but chose not to. The appellate court ultimately ruled in Talbot's favor, setting the stage for a potential retrial. Prosecutors announced plans to hold a second trial, but on December 22, 2022, the Washington State Supreme Court reinstated Talbot's original guilty verdict. The court determined that the defense's failure to use a peremptory challenge to dismiss the juror negated their argument of juror bias. The ruling reaffirmed Talbot's conviction, solidifying his status as a convicted murderer. Talbot remains in custody, serving his life sentences while awaiting further appeals. The case is a testament to the power of modern forensic science and the determination of investigators who refuse to let the murders of Tanya van Cuylenborg and 𝐽𝐾 go unsolved. The use of genetic genealogy in this case marked a turning point in criminal investigations, demonstrating the potential of this technology to solve even the most challenging cases. For the families of Tanya and Jay, the advancements in forensic science brought justice and a sense of closure that had eluded them for over 3 decades. While the legal battles surrounding Talbot's conviction may continue, the evidence against him stands as a powerful reminder that time, technology, and perseverance can bring the truth to light. In short, the murders of Tanya van Cuylenborg and 𝐽𝐾 were a haunting mystery that spanned more than 3 decades, leaving 2 families shattered and a community searching for answers. It was a case that exemplified the frustration and despair often associated with cold cases. Years of painstaking investigation, countless dead ends, and the lingering fear that justice might never be served. Yet the resolution of this case stands as a testament to the transformative power of forensic science and the unrelenting determination of investigators. For years, the evidence, DNA collected from Tanya's clothing, items left in the van, and the brutal nature of the crimes remained pieces of a puzzle no one could complete. Traditional investigative techniques yielded no leads, and the lack of a DNA match in criminal databases left investigators at a standstill. However, advancements in technology ultimately breathed new life into the investigation. The introduction of snapshot DNA phenotyping and genetic genealogy, particularly through 𝐸Dmatch.com, turned what seemed an unsolvable case into a landmark moment in criminal justice. The arrest and conviction of William Earl Talbot II in 2018 were groundbreaking. Forensic genealogy not only identified a suspect, but also linked him definitively to the crime through DNA evidence. Talbot's conviction sent a powerful message. Even the most careful criminals cannot remain hidden forever. For the families of Tanya and Jay, it was a bittersweet moment. While nothing could erase the pain of their loss, knowing that justice had been served brought long overdue closure. The legal battles following Talbot's conviction, including the appellate court's reversal and the subsequent reinstatement by the Washington State Supreme Court, highlighted the complexities of the judicial process. While procedural issues temporarily cast doubt on the verdict, the ultimate decision to uphold Talbot's guilt reaffirmed the strength of the evidence against him. His life sentences without parole stand as a measure of accountability for his actions. This case also set a precedent for how genetic genealogy can revolutionize the way law enforcement solves cold cases. It demonstrated that with persistence and innovation, even decades-old crimes can be solved, providing hope to families awaiting justice. The story of Tanya Van Cuylenborg and 𝐸𝐿 serves as a reminder that, though time may obscure the truth, it cannot erase it. In the end, the resilience of science and the dedication of those seeking justice ensured that their voices were heard and their murderer was held accountable. That's all for this video. We hope you have found this video informative and interesting. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comment section. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon for more interesting videos like this. Thank you for watching our video.